Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. HB 138 would repeal the crime of fornication. I haven't been able to track back how far that goes in the Virginia Code. I've been able to track it back about 200 years. I have no doubt it goes farther. It is quite an old and archaic crime. According to historians, in 1690 it comprised the single largest part of the criminal docket, at least in New England. But in Virginia, it has not been used to criminally prosecute consenting adults since prior to the Civil War. It is, in fact, unconstitutional, according to the Virginia Supreme Court, which held in the unanimous opinion of Martin v. Z. Hurl in 2005, based on the United States Supreme Court decision of Lawrence v. Texas in 2003, that it cannot survive even the lowest form of constitutional review. It furthers no legitimate state interest. This is basically the same line of cases that struck down sodomy laws, and this body, the General Assembly, saw fit to repeal those from the code. Now, it is true that even though consenting adults have not been criminally prosecuted since prior to the Civil War, non-consenting acts of sex and acts between adults and children are sometimes used with fornication to pile on. But it's already illegal under code sections, other code sections for non-consensual acts. It's also already illegal under other code sections for sexual acts between adults and children. So this statute really serves no purpose, and it actually, as our Virginia Supreme Court has said, cannot be constitutionally used, which is why the Association of Commonwealth Attorneys, Mike Doucette, has said they have no opposition to this bill. I'd like to clean up the code. This is the kind of law that when television news talked about this law and went around to various Virginians, it was treated with surprise and laughter and how silly it is that Virginia still has this. Very few states still have this law, and I'd like to strike it from our books.
Mr. Chair? Bell. So we've had a couple of bills along this line where we're having code sections, in this case very, very important code sections. Reading commercial sexual prostitution would be amended, felonious sexual assault would be amended. These are code sections that work all day, every day across the Commonwealth and will successfully prosecute. We don't typically wander through the code looking for things that are not worded perfectly but work because we're not smart enough to get it right. We had all this up here at examples where we thought we were clever, changed something that turns out that it actually had some impacts we weren't smart enough to think of, and something was working okay. But therefore, what we're looking for is there a case somewhere? Has someone been prosecuted? Has someone been brought forward? Is there some reason to make this change, other than just code commission stuff where we can let the code commission bring it on code? We have a bad case somewhere. Is there somebody who was being prosecuted for this improperly arrested that should have been?
We know, Delegate Bell, that in 2011 in Hampton Roads, a Newport newsman was charged with 2 counts of fornicating. The charges were later withdrawn. David Albo talked about this in 2013. There were 8 convictions that year. It tends to be the kind of thing where something is already illegal, and it's piling on with something that can't even be prosecuted. All the code sections that you mentioned still occur. They're still in the code. And in fact, actually this law broadens the crime because, for example, just looking at sex with a child, the code currently says you cannot fornicate with one's own child or grandchild. Now it just says you can't have sexual intercourse. So apparently the code section says if you're married to your own child, which again I realize is not allowed in Virginia, but might be allowed in some foreign country. I certainly don't know the laws of every foreign country. This makes it clear it's sexual intercourse with a child is prohibited.
No. I'm reading the line. It says adultery or fornication.
With one's own child or grandchild in violation of 8.2-366.
So you're changing something that has otherwise been effective. I mean, if a prosecutor comes up and says they can't do it, that's a big deal. It is also a big deal if someone's being prosecuted under inappropriate unconstitutional code sections. Those are reasons we address laws all the time. But it says adultery or fornication. So if you were somehow married to your own child, this would still be covered, right?
No, actually, according to the law as it presently exists, you can only be punished for fornicating with your own child. You cannot be punished for sexual intercourse Fornicating, of course, is unmarried sexual contact. So the law currently forbids only if you're unmarried to your child. And I realize it's a weird and unusual situation.
Line 156 reads adultery or fornication with one's own child.
Right, that's against the law. But not sexual intercourse, if you're married to that child.
How would that not be?
If you have, it's a weird thing, but if you have sexual intercourse with a child that you're married to, then it's not currently illegal because it's not fornication and it's not adultery. This would actually broaden it to say, in that very unusual situation, you just can't have sexual intercourse with a child. It doesn't matter whether you're married to the child or not. You can't have sexual intercourse with a child.
Mr. Chair, could I ask back? Could I ask back? I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut him off. The delegates, and I'd like to ask back.
I'm done.
Mr. Chair, can I have a question for David? At this point, one of the things that this committee and the Civil Law Subcommittee has had concern about has come up quite a few times is the adultery statute and the effect that that would have on divorce cases. And the Association of Matrimonial Attorneys has had a great deal of question about that. Wouldn't this, at that point, also remove the ability that someone would have to be able to plead the fifth in a divorce matter as well?
No, because I'm really not changing adultery. If you look, adultery still remains in the code. In fact, I don't really care whether the adultery is crossed out here. This was something that legislative services did because they thought it would be much clearer just to say sexual intercourse with a child. But it was not my intention to change adultery at all. It is my intention only to repeal the crime of fornication. And so these weird code sections about having sex with children, they took out adultery just to make clear that no sex with children is okay. But if you note, in all the other code sections, adultery remains. It just takes out the crime of fornication.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, that was my concern with civil proceedings. And I don't know if counsel, I'm looking at for adultery in the code, where else it appears. Or the delegate.
There's an entire separate code section on adultery. I can maybe you can give the council can give the code section. I can look it up, but you can probably find it. You'll see it is still there. I have not touched adultery, only fornication. Is it 346 maybe? Is that correct?
18.2.366.
Okay, so 18.2.366 is still in Article 3. Okay, so if you look at line 73, it says, for example, one of the things that this code section ostensibly prohibits is you can't give a license to a bar which is next door or close to where fornicating is occurring. So in this case, it would just go to 18.2-346 at SEC because 18.2-344, which is the crime of fornication, would be removed. So, but it does not affect adultery. And it certainly is not intended to, and if anyone wants to, if you'd like me to amend it to keep the adultery in the part about sex with one's child, it's a very strange law, but I guess someone could say that adultery or sexual intercourse, although I don't really see why adultery or sexual intercourse, and sexual intercourse itself with a child is already what my intent is to make illegal. It seems to me that whether or not you have adultery with your own child is not really the point. The point is we don't want sex with children, not the marital status. It shouldn't matter whether you're married or not. If you have sex with a child, it's a bad thing.
Mr. Chair, can I ask back? May I ask back a step forward?
I'm sorry?
I have a question back. I'm sorry. Right behind you is the guy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Back. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm not trying to cut you off. But
No. Go ahead.
Mr. Doucette, I am very conscious of the limitations we have for knowing the code. By ourselves, we study this more closely than most. All I know is that whenever we just make changes just to make them, we often have unintended consequences. These code sections are among the more important ones in the Code of Virginia in terms of prosecuting sexual offenses. Number one, are they working right now? In other words, are you able to successfully prosecute people that commit these crimes with these words imposed?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Delegate Aaron. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Okay,
apologize.
technology listening. the audience wishing to speak in favor of the bill, please come forward. There's no association for this.
I would like, though, to ask Becca if there would in any way be harmed. You asked whether the current section, they can prosecute all they are. I'd like him to state whether he'd be harmed if this code were changed in this way, in any way would harm their prosecution. Because I think the answer is, if it doesn't help and it doesn't harm, let's clean up the code to get rid of something that our own Supreme Court has said is unconstitutional and our own citizens make fun of, given that I don't know how many millions have committed this crime or continue to, but it's certainly not something that is seen very respectfully today. So I think if I could bring the witness back up to say whether or not there's any harm in changing the code in this way to his prosecution. Is that a fair question?
I have to respect the sure. I'm sorry. Please.
Mr. Chairman, in answer to the delegate's question, the reason why we took no position on this particular bill is no, we don't see any harm either, but it is a policy decision that this body gets to make.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, we operate on motions. Are there any motions?